Um, any questions before I jump into my notes? All right, cool. So I'm gonna try to run through this and not take as long as I did last time. But there's some things that I want to kind of point out and make sure that you guys understand before we move forward. I know I mentioned last week Baldwin's Pillars of White Supremacy. So I kind of want to touch back into that, and I also want to deal with this Baldwinian notion of love. That's a little bit different from how we may think about love and juxtapose the way that Baldwin is talking about love. So one, dealing with the pillars of white supremacy. We all know that pillars are meant to maintain or hold up structures, right? So when we think about the pillars of white supremacy, Baldwin articulates these pillars in two ways. One of them being the maintenance of white innocence, right? So the institutions that are set in place to maintain this notion of innocence for whiteness, and then two, the white imagination. Um, and I'll give you a quick example on how these play out, right? If you think about the white imagination, to me, the quintessential depiction of the white imagination could be understood through Hollywood, right? Um, so think about the role that film and television has done to describe blackness in a particular way that you understand it to be threatening, right? I don't know, has anybody familiar with the film Birth of a Nation, D.W. Griffith's film Birth of the Nation? Um, I see Helena shaking her head. Now you look a little like you're not sure. So real quick, The Birth of a Nation is a film, and correct me if I'm wrong, Helena. I want to say that it comes out in the early 1900s, maybe like 1910, something around there. I could not be a little bit off on the years, but it's widely still to this day is widely recognized as a vanguard, avant-garde film, right? As far as the way that it's shot, as far as some of the framing that he uses, as far as the scenes and what have you. But the theme of the film, right? This is the Reconstruction Era. Black folks have been able to organize and vote themselves into political office, right? And due to this, they depict these black politicians in, like, the state house and what have you, feet on the desk, eating watermelon, eating chicken, right? These really just stereotypical depictions of blackness. Um, but what happens is a woman is trying to flee a black man who's attempting to rape her. Opposed to being raped, she jumps off of a cliff, and this act ensues the birth of the Ku Klux Klan, right? And the Klan comes in and they ride in and they come to save the day, so to speak. Now, the reason why this becomes important, again, we're thinking about the white imagination, right? This depiction of D.W. Griffith's imagination went national, right? They had a film tour of the film. The film was shown in the White House, right? So it really set the tone and the tempo on how blackness would be understood through film, okay? Fast forward, 90 years later, right? I'm growing up in South LA, and there's these movies coming out that depicts blackness that I think are super dope, right? But we have like your Boys to Men. Sorry, Boys to Men, Boys in the Hood. Excuse me. You have Boys in the Hood. You have Menace to Society. You have the movie Dead Presidents, right? So there's these movies that come out in the 90s and they're by black filmmakers, right? But they still fit these very same tropes, okay? The same trope of someone to be feared, right? Um, so this is the white imagination at play, okay? So now we get to our time now, and this is how this plays out. A police officer arrives to the scene, right? Someone's unarmed, but they're armed with blackness, right? So one thing leads to another. There's a killing that takes place. An unarmed black man is killed. They go before court, right? And then the court lets the police officer off under the premise of a justifiable homicide, right? The homicide becomes justifiable because the police officer says what? I fear for my life. My life was threatened. I felt threatened, right? Now, regardless of the individual being unarmed, right? Regardless of it being possibly a woman, a child, right, or a young girl, right? This fear becomes justified, because of these things like movies and these tropes that you get of blackness that has depicted blackness as something to be feared, right? So this is the white imagination at play. But then you have the court systems that will say, well, yeah, that homicide is justifiable because I can see how you could be afraid for your life, although that does not make rational sense, right? So here we have the white imagination producing this fear that gets justified through the systems of the courts, which maintains the white innocence, right? So now these police officers, the Amber Geigers, even though she got guilty, right, she gets a very light sentence, right? And you get these continuous processes of these individuals being freed, right? So these are how you're looking. This is what Baldwin says holds up the system of white supremacy, white imagination, and you can see that the manifestation of that through film, and then the maintenance of white innocence. And you can see the manifestation of that through the court system and the legal disproportionate way that the legal system operates. Okay, so this is his notion of how white supremacy is held up. I'm going to end with his notion of love to close out my speech. So, couple things. How Baldwin starts off the letter to his nephew, right? He starts it 5 times and rips it up 5 times. So he's struggling to get this out, right? He's writing to his nephew on his 14th birthday, talking about when Baldwin himself was 14 and his coming to age growing up in Harlem. Also, if those who are familiar with Baldwin, the book Go Tell It on the Mountain is kind of like his autobiography, if you will, right? And in that book, he's talking about himself being 14 and going through his life in Harlem. So you see this notion of being 14 very quintessential to Baldwin. For those who watched the little 7-minute video that I did, you know that I received this book when I was 14 from my uncle, right? So you can see how the lessons are being passed down. He says on page 18, you can only be destroyed by believing that you really are what the white world calls a nigger, right? So again, he introduces this notion of double consciousness within that phrase there, right? And he doesn't use the term double consciousness, but that's what he's dealing with, right? Because we know that the white world views you like this. You know, we view ourselves another way, but you will be destroyed by believing what the white world believes of you, right? Moving to page 20. And this is where the white innocence comes in at. And your guys' pages may be different because I have the book and you guys have the PDF. But he says, it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime, right? So, and if you listen to this carefully, Baldwin's not really concerned about the devastation that took place, right? It happens. It's history, right? There was slavery that took place and things of that nature. Did you have a question, Megan?
No, I think my computer started reworking. Sorry.
No worries. So, you know, there's things that take place in history that we cannot do anything about, right? So another way to think about this when the conversation of reparations comes up, right? It's like, well, we can't, that was my ancestors. I didn't really do that. So why should I have to pay, right? So Baldwin is saying like, yo, I get that. I'll give you that, right? But what you cannot do is sit up here and act like you're innocent, right? And it's the innocence which constitutes the crime. So what happened in the past, I'm not even considering that the crime. I'm chalking that up to history. But your need to cling to your innocence, that's where the problem lies, right? Because with you trying to maintain and hold on to this innocence, we can't deal with the past at a level that allows us to move forward, right? We can't have atonement because you're acting like these things didn't happen or you had no role in what happened, right? So it's this innocence that Baldwin is saying is problematic, okay? And then he kind of goes into their response, right, to the way that they would respond to his articulations. No, this is not true. How bitter you are. But I'm writing this letter to you to try to tell you something about how to handle them, for most of them do not know you yet exist, right? Do not yet know you exist. And to me, this is where we get Baldwin's thesis. I am writing this letter to you to try to tell you something about how to handle them, right? So this letter is trying to instruct his nephew, all black children, all marginalized children, right, on how to deal with them, how to navigate this world that's anti-black, right? This is what he wants you to walk away with upon reading this text. And then on page 21, well, on the next page, he says, this innocent country, again, this innocence he's playing with, right? This innocent country sets you down in a ghetto in which, in fact, it intended that you should perish. Let me spell out precisely what I mean by that. For the heart of the matter is here, and the root of my dispute with my country. You were born where you were born and faced the future you faced because you were black and for no other reason. The limits of your ambition were thus expected to be set forever. You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways possible that you are a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity, right? And to me, that's probably one of the most well-written paragraphs that offers a critique that you could really find, right? It's a scathing critique, but it's stated so poetically and so beautifully, at least in my understanding, right? So again, this country is trying to maintain its innocence, but at the same time, they know very well that they put you in these ghettos with the purpose of you not to make it out, right? And with the notion of you understanding the limitations of your experience because you're in that ghetto. Think back to the boys on Tuesday, right? All those opportunities were on the other side of the veil. And he had, and normally, right, people would make peace with what was on their side of the veil and just take that as their only opportunities. But the boys like, nah, I'm going to wrest these opportunities from the other world, right? But Baldwin is just saying, yo, I know the intentionality behind these ghettos that we all are forced to come up under, right? And ultimately, they're getting you to be accepting to your mediocrity, to be average, right? And you see that play out now. Well, why don't people just move out? Why would you live in Compton? Just move, right? Like if it was just that easy just to move out of Compton, right? So you see how these things play out for Baldwin. On page 20, well, for me it's 22. And I'm almost there. He says, take no one's word for anything, including mine, but trust your experience. I'll move forward. The details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe what white people say about you. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do, and cause you to endure does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity. Right? I'm going to read that one more time because that last part is very fecund. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do and cause you to endure, does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity, right? So again, it's not about because, and so think about on Tuesday, right? Du Bois shifting from the Negro problem being black folks, but to understanding that the conditions that black folks are put in are the problem. This is the same move that Baldwin's making, right? So realize that just because you're in the ghetto, that don't mean there's something wrong with you, right? Just because you're poor, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, right? Realize that these things are been done deliberately to make you feel some kind of way. And it doesn't mean anything negative on you, but it reflects the inhumanity of a system of white supremacy, right? It speaks to their inhumanity, right? How could you enslave the people for over 500 years and then consider yourself to be human, right? How could you separate families? How could you impregnate these women through rape, right? And then not pay attention to the child you created, right? And then still consider yourself to be human. Furthermore, consider yourself to be innocent, right? So this is the problem that Baldwin is picking up on, right? And then, so he closes out the essay or the letter with this idea of love being the only thing that's going to be able to reconcile this difference, right? The only thing that's going to be able to right the wrongs, so to speak, right? But I don't want you guys to think Baldwin is just saying like, yo, let's go out and make a whole bunch of mixed kids. That's not what he's advocating for, right? When Baldwin's talking about love, he's talking about a love that will strip you down and show you your true self, right? One of his famous quotes is, "If I love you, I must make you aware of the things that you don't know," right? And so this is the work. This is the love, the work that love, in Baldwin's understanding, is supposed to do. If you read like a lot of his novels, he uses mirrors, he uses windows, and he uses bodies of water to symbolize the work that love should do, right? So if the character is going through something that's really deep and it's really revealing themselves to themselves, he'll have them go stand at a window, right? He'll have them walk past the mirror or look out over a body of water, right? And if we use the example of a mirror, it becomes very generative for us. So we're about to go out for the weekend, right? You got your idea of what you're going to wear. You got your idea, your outfit's coordinated, everything is put together. But before you leave your house, you're going to make sure you check the mirror so that way how you think your outfit looks is how it looks in real life, right? So that the work that the mirror is doing is of showing you your true outfit, not what you think your outfit looked like, but what your outfit really looks like, right? Your shirt might be too small, right? It's showing you a little bit too much of your stomach, right? So you might want to go grab another shirt, right? That's what love is supposed to do. If you're out of pocket, love should tell you that you're out of pocket, right? If you need humility, love should tell you, yo, you need to humble yourself. That's the work that the love should be doing, right? And this is the love that Baldwin's talking about that's going to bring some type of reconciliation, that's going to allow this country to move forward, okay? And he says, you know, of course we know that they're celebrating freedom 100 years too soon because there's certain segments of the population who have yet to receive that freedom, right? So those are my notes for the reading. We could open it up to Fishbowl. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer for the Fishbowl?
I can go.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, like as I was reading it, I was wondering if Baldwin maybe had a little something beyond empathy for white people, like seeing them kind of broken, like they don't see the system that they've created where they're on top and everybody else is below them. Like there's a part of it where he points out that they're kind of trapped, and he sees that they're trapped in like this cycle where the only way for them to stay on top is to keep somebody at the bottom. Is it empathy? Am I using the wrong word for what he might be feeling? Almost like like when I read it, it was like he almost feels like he feels sorry for them for losing their humanity and like not realizing that.
Yeah, you know, Danny, to be honest with you, man, like, so try the best way to articulate this. When I for my first semester of my PhD program, we had a seminar on Baldwin, right? And all we did was read Baldwin for the whole semester. And at first I'm like, man, this cat, he loved him so he got this love for white folks. He got like an affinity for white folks, an empathy for white folks, right? He's very generous in his critique of whiteness, right?
Yes.
But once I kind of understood the way that he talks about love, it kind of shifted for me that empathy, right? Because the way that he's talking about love there is an empathy there, right? But it's not a coddling, right? Or it's not to continue to pat them on the back and make sure that they feel comfortable and they don't know the truth of their actions, right? But you know, I wouldn't disagree with you. There is an empathy there, and I think it goes back to that statement that he says of it speaks only to their inhumanity,
Right.
right? And if you kind of want to take this conversation further on your own research, bless you, Elena. There's a book called Giovanni's Room. It's a really good book. Baldwin is actually writing, the main character Giovanni is a white character, and he's writing strictly from the standpoint of whiteness. And what is really profound about the book is he talks about how white supremacy, it also impacts white people, right? So like if you think about the ideal depiction of whiteness, right? You have to be a man, you have to be rich, you have to be Christian, you have to be heterosexual, right? So these are the like some of the pillars, if you would, for making up the ideal individual in a white supremacist paradigm, right? So in Giovanni's Room, the character is homosexual, so that knocks him one notch out of that ideal depiction, right?
Okay.
So he's struggling because of his homosexuality to perform this ideal depiction of whiteness, right? So Baldwin understands like that type of intersection, which allows him to be empathetic. You know, so I don't think you're wrong, Danny. I think you're really reading closely and you're picking up on it, but it's not an empathy that's going to excuse them for the fucked up.
No, not at all. He needs to hold them up to that mirror, like you said. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth, it's on you.
Yeah, so I did actually pick out a quote. So on the bottom of page 2 and the beginning of page 3, he says, "And this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it." I believe this is relevant throughout history because, as it was mentioned before, America doesn't want to be wrong. It doesn't want to be accused of making a mistake. And I believe that's why people are so ignorant towards oppression towards Black people. And it's crazy how it's been going on for so long that it now seems natural for white people to oppress Black people. I think it's interesting how in the last reading, double consciousness wasn't depicted as it was in this reading. In the last reading, it wasn't depicted as forgiving, like how Baldwin mentions it here. In Baldwin's letter, he is concentrated on the idea of love cures all. So I thought it was interesting how even though everything that defines him was attacked by white people, he still uses the notion of love. And he still believes that even though racism has been going on for so long, it can still be cured.
Yeah, go ahead, Elena.
Sorry, just I don't want to like interrupt the discussion format. Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good. That's only two, so you go ahead.
Okay. Just jumping off of Danny's comment again, I feel like James Baldwin definitely was on to something in terms of like just something I recently read. There's this book called A Course in Miracles, and this the author said that every action or every human behavior in this world is either an expression of love or a call for it. And I feel like James Baldwin was like onto that of like how of like we either express love or we make actions because we're not getting enough or we need love. And I've only read If Beale Street Could Talk, but I already know like his writing about love and that basically in innocence, because that's like has an element of literal innocence because it's related to like the legal system. He definitely is onto that, which I thought was interesting. And he gives me, from what I know about him so far, like he seems like a very kind of spiritual being. He thinks about the bigger picture. If you guys know what I mean, maybe that's the wrong word, but to me that resonates with me. And then there was one more thing that caught my eye like dramatically, which was the quote about how he says, you were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. And that, I think, is my favorite too, because it brings about like this. It just made me think that for us, like we're raised for, or people of culture, or in my experience, this is true, that we're raised like by our parents with high expectations a lot of the time for excellence. They expect us to aspire to excellence and to deliver on that. But then, and so it creates a lot of pressure. Like for me, also, there's like I'm South Asian. There's a stereotype like of how we're, you know, really good at school and academics and stuff, and our parents put a lot of pressure on us. But then when you get to like the outer the world, there's like, you can't, it's really hard to deliver on that excellence and be the best, because like as your parents expected, because white people are at an advantage of you because they have more, the system gives them an advantage. And so although we were raised to most of the time aspire to excellence, we have to settle with mediocrity because of the system. Like again, for me, in like entertainment, I want to obviously I'm aspiring for excellence, you know, but like how many South Asian actors, none of them have like won an Oscar, I think, for example, you know, things like that. How many South Asian directors do you know? Because it's just the system doesn't give us enough of a place or opportunities, or like we keep trying, but we can't like reach the heights that our white counterparts have. So I thought that was really interesting, and how that relates to like other people of culture, and also how it's still very relevant today. All of the stuff he says is all very relevant today. But that definitely jumped out of me.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points, Elena. And then also, like, especially in the classroom, you see this dynamic play out, what they call deficit model learning experiences, right? So teachers are going to automatically assume that this black kid in their class is going to be average, right? And no matter how intelligent that individual may be, they're going to always expect the mediocrity from them, right? And then what may happen is their cultural expressions may not get recognized as cultural expressions. They'll just get viewed as being disruptive, right? So now we're going to create behavior issues to keep you in that space of mediocrity. Also, I was looking at the chat. Megan, I see your hand. I just want to bring up one point that you put in the chat as far as this childlike notion of the way that he's dealing with his white counterparts, right? And it's funny because every time I teach Baldwin, the child notion comes up, and it's hard not to see it that way, right? Because when you think about children, you know some things that your children don't know, just because they don't have the experience to be able to have that knowledge, right? And I think the only difference that I see in this regard, right, is they don't know, but these folks know. They know very well, right? They know so well that they know to hide it, and they know to act like these things aren't there. They know to pass legislation that says critical race theory can't be taught in class, right? So it's operating it's more sinister than just childlike negligence or ignorance. But I do understand the paternal nature of people of culture, because we can't act like we don't know, right? Our experiences don't allow us the comfortability to say, I don't know about that, right? And for those who try to play that, you sound crazy. I'm thinking about Lil Wayne saying that, I don't see police brutality because one police officer saved my life when I got shot in the chest, right? Like, okay, bro, that's one experience. Like you one motherfucker to thousands who had negative experiences. Kanye's, yes, absolutely, right? So I agree with you, Megan, in the sense of the childlike nature and the way that Baldwin articulates it. But again, I can't let them off the hook because I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and there are certain things that they don't know, right? Like, and it's obvious. But these folks know, right? Go ahead, Megan.
I think what I was trying to say is that, we're talking about like this white innocence and how they like portray these types of things. And they're like, I'm the victim, like have this victim mentality of stuff. And it's so crazy. Like I see it on TikTok a lot where they like make up these scenarios in their head for being like they're in like a school shooting scenario and they're like all the Christians stand up or like all these things and they're like, oh, it's me, like I'm gonna be the one. And I'm just like, you guys want to be oppressed so bad, like you make up these things that don't happen. Like that is like a child's imagination. Like that is crazy to me. And when I'm talking about like a child, I think I mean like when you're in these conversations with people who choose to stay blind about it, they want to, shift the blame or they don't understand. And so you have to like, we can't talk in an academic language like we are right now. You have to like try to break it down to such a level. You have to use like, euphemisms and like on all these things so then they can like try to understand. And I'm like, I feel like that's like a very childlike mentality. Like they don't want to admit that they're wrong, therefore they don't see it. They didn't do it. It wasn't them. Like that, I think that's what more I was meaning. Um, and then when we're talking about like, who said it? Like in the classroom and things, oh man, I'm trying to remember who, I think it was, there was a really good point that someone brought up about something about in the classroom and I like totally just lost my train of thought. But I don't.
Deficit model teaching, like seeing the mediocrity in the child in the
Yes,
classroom.
there we go. And when you're talking about how things can be expressed as like a cultural thing, but it's viewed as being disruptive, I just saw something and it was, all these graduates, like college and high school graduates, and they're like fling their shoes off and start dancing on stage and just have like such joy about this accomplishment. And how you always see like administrators in every video that I've seen, they're like white administrators are like, that's inappropriate, this is a graduation, like you can't do that. And how people like, you guys need to stop like oppressing Black joy. Like you guys need to understand like this is like, in some cases like a cultural expression of things, and that you just don't get it. And I thought that was so interesting because I've never really thought about that before, but how people are always trying to fit, people of culture and Black people in these certain boxes of like formalities and stuff like that, and just completely repressing like, the cultural norms, the practices and the expression of joy and proudness and happiness to fit like, this white model of just like, oh, clapping. Like I was just at a graduation and these families were going crazy when their kid's name was called and it was awesome. And then this family next to me was like, oh my God, like they're so loud. Like that's so weird. And I'm like, it's different. And they just can't see that. And I think it's so crazy that like people need to tell other people, like, you just don't get it. Like, this is not just your moment. This is like our moment too. So
Yeah, I think the way you ended it was like so spot on, because that, to me, that's a large part of the difference, right? Especially when you think about things like first generation graduates and what have you, right? So for the white family, it may not be that big of a deal because maybe everyone in the family graduated college. So it's like, yo, I got one. We got like 10 degrees hanging up in the office, right? So, but for these other families, right, like not only did you get this diploma, but I'm expecting the whole family to come along with your success, right? So your job may be able to pay bills, pay the mortgage, whatever, take care of grandma, take care of abuela, you know what I mean? So it's a different way of looking at success. Um, and it's funny. And then another part of me, Megan, I wonder, is it just jealousy, right? Like you can't get up there and cut that two-step like they cutting this two-step, so nobody can two-step, right? Like it's not, we're not going to do that here. So it's kind of the things that I isolate between. But you bring up a really good point with that. And then you mentioned the suppression of Black joy. Historically, That's a thing, right? Have you ever, if anybody heard of a laughing barrel? No? Okay, so this is during the Jim Crow, post-Reconstruction Black Code era, right? And literally a laughing barrel would be, so me and my homeboys walking down the street, my homeboy crack a joke, and I'm about to laugh, right? But we're outside, and there may be some white folks outside with us. So instead of me laughing, I need to go find a barrel, put my head in the barrel, laugh, get all that out of me, compose myself, then I can pull my head out of my barrel and then continue on about my day, right? So this idea or this notion of suppressing black joy is a real thing. It's a real thing that has historical implications, right? Like you literally could not laugh in front of white people. What's more of a human expression than laughter, right? Like that's like the purest expression of humanity is someone laughing, right? And to have to suppress that, it makes you think like, again, what type of insecure, inhumane individual are you to where you're threatened by someone's laughter, right? That's like the most non-threatening thing someone could do is laugh, right? Like that all is I believe is clinically proven to see someone smile makes your mood feel better, right? So what kind of state are you in to say I don't even want to see your ass smile, right? I don't even want to deal with that. Other thoughts about the reading? Edgar, you put a great point in the chat. Did you want to speak on that a little bit more?
In the letter, it says, there's a quote that says, many of them indeed know better, but as you will discover, people find it very difficult to act on what they know. To act is to be committed, and to be committed is to be in danger. In the case, the danger in their minds and hearts of most white Americans is the loss of their identity.
And that's profound, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why things like critical race theory and things of that nature is viewed as a threat, because it's going to erode the very understanding of who you are, right? Like you can't view yourself as the greatest nation in the world when you really get into the history of the systems of enslavement and how you damn near wiped out all the indigenous people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a contradiction that cannot be settled, right? So it's easier just to try to maintain this innocence and proceed with the program like that because it keeps your status symbol elevated, right? Elaine, go, if you want to speak on that, go ahead. I think that's a really good point you put in the chat.
Yeah, coming back to these great points, coming back from their ignorance and their childlike behaviors, like from what Megan said and then what Edgar said, from they kind of like what he says, that people do see the injustice that happens to people, but they can't be seen as the ones who do it, bringing it up because they're feared to be criticized. I kind of see this like we can't be free until they're free, because these people are suppressing them, even though they're the ones trapped in this ignorance. Like everyone else is seeing like they're ignorant. They can't seem to get past to the point that, we're all different. Like everyone here understands that we're all different. We all come from different cultural backgrounds. Like we all celebrate different things, but these people think and they criticize us still from being different. Like you're not moving on from the point where, we need to move on. Like we have to be able to express ourselves, be free, but we can't have that until they realize that we can be free. That's kind of what I got from Baldwin.
That's crazy, Lane, because in the second half of the book, in the second essay that he writes, I believe it's My Dungeon Ship is the name of the essay. He literally says that, like, we will not get free until they get free, until they free themselves from their own hangups. And I'm trying to find the page, but like I'm tripping off the fact of how concise you were on your analysis, and you didn't even read that part of the book.
I kind of sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
I kind of got more with when he said, you have, and as many of us have, defeated this intent and by a terrible law, a terrible paradox, those innocents who believe that you're imprisonment made them safer, losing their grasp of reality. This made me understand what he was trying to say at the end.
Yeah. Yep. It's a very good point. Any other, you know what, you guys, let's do this. I just want to kind of go over a quick abstract with you all, because I know I said I would do that today with the time that we have left. So give me like 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll address any question that you guys may have, and we'll call it a day. Let me pull up an abstract. Give me 1 second. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay. So this could serve as like an abstract, right? So this is a paper that I wrote for my seminar in the spring, a paper on Stuart Hall, right? So how does Stuart Hall engage a problem? How does Hall evolve that problem into a problematic? So I want you guys to think about your journals and the final component of your journals, right? The question. So think about how like these literal questions that I had concerning Stuart Hall turns into the actual paper that I'm going to write. Is there a methodological approach to the production of Hall's problematic? Through an investigation of Hall's theorizations on race, can we glean a concrete methodological approach through the production of Hall's problematic? Can Hall's methodology serve as a pedagogical approach to theorization? These are the questions I seek to engage in my inquiry into the work of Stuart Hall. Looking at his essays, Race, the Floating Signifier, What is the Black and Black Popular Culture, and Race, Articulation in Society Structured in Dominance. Through this inquiry, I seek to uncover a cultural studies method or Stuart Hall approach to intellectual work. The method of cultural studies becomes tied to pedagogy as it provides a framework on how to do cultural studies work. I can think of no one better than Stuart Hall for a case study on how to do cultural studies work. So this kind of gives you a snapshot on what the rest of the essay will be about. It articulates the questions that are driving the essay. The only thing to be critical about myself that this does not offer from a standpoint of an abstract is your approach. So in the first chapter, we're going to detail what pedagogy is. In the second chapter, we're going to detail what the cultural studies method is. In the third chapter, I'm going to talk about race as a problematic, right? So you want to include in your abstract how you'll be moving through the essay. And this may be redundant for some of you guys. I know, I believe Marlon was saying he's an English major. I don't think he's on the line today. So some of this may be, redundant. If it is, I apologize. But for those who are, your first semester or first year in school, this may be useful. And this is why I want to take some time to go through that. So think about your abstract so you have your movie, right? But your abstract is going to be that movie trailer that's going to get people to want to watch the movie or read the essay. Literally how an abstract will play out in real time, right? So let's just say that you're doing some research and you're on like these various online digital libraries, and instead of you having to read the whole essay to see if this is useful or not, you read those abstracts and it gives you a sense of what the author will be dealing with, and then you could determine, yeah, I could use this for my essay research or not, right? So it's a snapshot into what you'll be dealing with. But what this paragraph does do very well, it demonstrates how questions can determine and guide your research. So when I ask you guys to write those questions for your journals, I want you guys to start thinking about it in those two ways, especially now as you're starting to think about, producing that paper for, not the paper, but the proposal for the paper, right? So in regards to the proposal, what would be okay with me, right? It's a paragraph, something like this, right? And then I believe I have it on here. And then you're going to put together your bibliography. Don't worry about the endnotes. You're not going to have endnotes because you're not writing the paper, so that's not going to impact you at all. But you would want to have the bibliography. So all I'm looking for is that intro paragraph and this bibliography. And then that way, that would be a sufficient paper proposal. Does that make sense? Is there any questions as it pertains to that? Oh, go ahead, Elena.
What kind of sources are you looking for specifically, other than like scholarly, academic, journal type sources? Or are you just looking exclusively for that?
Let's just leave it to the academic sources for now, because I think I only required 5. So you could use like actual texts that we've read in class, and then if you find like articles that deal with the subject matter, that would be fine. So like your Cal State LA library should be able to give you some good articles. There's Just Store should give you some good articles. ResearchGate is another place to get some articles. Things of that nature. But really, if you start with our library, you should be able to get some good good academic sources. So again, just 5. You should be able to really pull from the text that we've covered, and then maybe add 2 more or 3 more to that to give you the total of 5. And then
perfect.
Great. I was actually just about, you read my mind, Elena. You could do Chicago or APA or MLA. Either one of those 3 I'm cool with. For me, writing a paper, I like Chicago better just because it doesn't break up the flow. Like sometimes with APA and MLA, you have to kind of like chunk things off with the brackets, to where with Chicago, you just put like a little number by it and kind of keep it moving. And it just kind of allows the paper to flow a little bit better. But also, oftentimes, the citations is specified to the journal. So let's just say that you wanted to submit an article for publications, right? The Journal of Pan-African Studies may require you to use Chicago, right? While an English journal may require to use APA or MLA. So it determines, and then also, the discipline. So for example, I know sociology, they use like, I want to say APA, whereas the humanities, they use Chicago. So those are some of the distinctions as to what stylistic form of citations you would use. But for me, any one of the 3 is perfectly fine. I'm familiar with all 3. I just want to kind of give you some background as to why you may choose different ones. Any other questions?
Since we have to have 5, but you only want an abstract, which is typically like 1 page, you just want us to like quickly, like for one of them, use a quote, and then for another one, just like mention their work and then put them in the bibliography, or how do you like?
Nah, you don't even have to do that. Just so like, if you were to continue with the paper, these would be the 5 sources I'm going to pull from. So you don't have to quote. It's not like an annotated bibliography where you would put in there the quote and what have you. It's just a standard bibliography of who the source material is coming from.
Okay, and then you just want us like topic-wise to just write about something like we got from the course, or do you have like a prompt that you want us to kind of follow?
No, I want it really come from you guys. Ideally, it would come from the questions that you guys are asking in your journals, right? Okay. And that's why I chose the paragraph that I chose, because it's really driven by questions, right? You see how, like, and then literally throughout the rest of that essay, I address each one of those questions, right? So I think that would be a great place to start. That's just a good practice for academic work. The question is going to be the thrust of the work. So kind of go through your journals and see if you wrote a question that you feel like I could work with this. I could see this turning into something bigger. Any other questions? All right. And then don't hesitate to reach out to me if you guys have questions about the proposal. We could set up a quick Zoom, and I can answer whatever question you guys may have. If you want to shoot me something, I could review it and get you guys back some responses. Whatever you feel, I'm here at your disposal. It's crazy. We only have 1 week left. So, that's that. I want to show you next week's material. It's one reading, and the rest is all documentary. So let me kind of get that pulled up, and we'll call it a day. So I think this section of the course is typically one of my favorites. I love the idea of problematization. Excuse me. I like to problematize shit, right? And I think one of the things that I love to problematize is gangs, right? Because we have an understanding of gangs as this pariah in the community, but once you get into the origins of the gangs, it kind of causes you to look at them differently. So we'll start with Huey P. Newton in this notion of in defense of self-defense. It's 2 speeches that he's given. It's only 4 pages though, so it's not a lot of reading, but this will set like the context in the foreground for the documentaries that you'll watch. So move through it like this. Do the Huey P. Newton first, and then go through Bastards of the Party, and then we'll go to the LA 92. So this talks about the origins of gangs, and if you think about the title of the documentary, Bastards of the Party, it kind of gets you an idea of what they're dealing with. Bastards of the Black Panther Party, and that's why I have those together. And then this LA 92 documentary. It was on Netflix, but they removed it on Netflix, and I found it on YouTube. So hopefully the link is still good. But this is kind of dope because one of the things of the LA riots of 92, because there's been several, of 92, that don't often get talked about is the role of the gangs in kind of keeping the riots organized, if you will. So you'll get a greater insight on that once you watch the documentary. So this will be the material to close out our semester or our summer session. And then on Thursday of next week, I'll let you know. Actually, I think it's already up. So you should be able to submit your final journal and the final paper proposal by June 10th, 12 o'clock, and we should be good to go. So again, if there's any questions, any comments, any concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll be happy to address any of those. Go ahead, Megan.
And then do you want a journal for each one of the documentaries as well? Or just the reading?
Do the reading and choose one journal. Do the reading and choose one documentary, whichever one speaks to you the most. So with that being said, let me go back. I'll let you guys know how many journals you should be submitting total. And then correct me if I'm wrong, because I forget shit. So it should be. I know they came from before Columbus, and we had the hidden history of Haiti. So that should be 2 for the journal entries. All the other stuff was additional material. And then we have Souls of Black Folks and the Fire Next Time. So that should be 4. And then for the next week, it will be the Huey P. Newton reader, and then one of these 2 documentaries. So that will be 6 total journals you'll be submitting here on June 10th. And then at the same time, you'll have the final paper proposal due. And just for clarification, it doesn't have to be the abstract, doesn't have to be a full page. It can literally be a paragraph, right? It could be a well thought out, well articulated paragraph, and I'm okay with that as well. Any other questions? All right, you guys. Have a good weekend. Be safe. Be healthy. Try to get some water and exercise and some sun. And I will see you next Tuesday. Peace.